Good evening. Thank you, Prajwal, and namaskar to everyone. So we are continuing our discussion on this interesting subject, the fundamental text of Indian philosophy. So today, I'm going to discuss some of the vital aspects of Dvaita philosophy, which sometimes can be is liable to be misunderstood frequently. So that's what I'm going to focus on today. You know, according to Advaita, the absolute reality is beyond definition and beyond empirical perception, in the sense we cannot perceive or comprehend the absolute reality in the Advaitic terminology, or God in the traditional religious monotheistic tradition. God cannot be defined, cannot be directly perceived the way we perceive and comprehend empirical things. So different objects we can comprehend, we can recognize using our mind and any of the five senses. When eyes and mind come together, we can see an object, and that's how we recognize an object as a visual object. When mind and ears come together, we hear things and we recognize the existence of something by hearing, and so on. All the five senses and mind together, we perceive different empirical things. This is a normal, the normal outlook. And in Advaita, they accept six types of tools of epistemology, or we may call it theory of knowledge, pramanas, we call it. Pratyaksha, Anumana, Upamana, Shabda, Arthavati, Anubalabdhi. In English, direct perception, sensory perception, inference, comparison, a presumption, maybe verbal testimony, and also negation. Negation also is a kind of knowledge. You come to know of the absence of something, that is also a kind of knowledge. And of course, you know, I have already mentioned earlier that the Indian Pramana Shastra, Indian epistemology, sometimes becomes very, very elastic. Some of the fringe groups of Indian philosophical systems accept four more additional tools, which somehow can be included within the umbrella category of inference or presumption. For example, Sambhava and Aitikya, something that happened and you come to know about it, and some kind of a hearsay, and then some external gesture, and then after leaving out all other possibilities, you infer something. Actually, all these are different expressions, different forms of inference according to Naigayikas and others. But the fringe groups, like the Pauranikas, you know, there are many fringe groups of Indian philosophy. They are mostly the masses, you know, those who believe in mythological stories, you know, they believe in this extended form of epistemology. But Advaita accepts only six, that is Pratyaksha, Anumana, Upamana, Shabda, Arthavati, and Anubalabdhi. And of course, among the Mimamsakas, the Bhatta, the more prominent of the Mimamsaka systems, accept six pramanas, and Prabhakara just accept only five pramanas. Buddhists accept only two, and Indian materialists accept only one, Pratyaksha pramana, direct perception. More or less, you know, they correspond to modern ultra rigid, fanatic scientists. They will tell you whatever science reveals alone is only truth, nothing else. They're more or less right. Now, coming to our subject today, how do we know, how do we understand something that is empirically not cognizable, something that we cannot see, we cannot understand through direct perception, inference, or verbal testimony, how do we understand something like the Brahman or God? Even according to the monotheistic Vaishnava traditions also, the absolute reality, Narayana or Vasudeva or Shiva, according to the Shaivites, the South Indian school of Shaivism, and also Kashmir Shaivism. The ultimate reality of Shiva is not empirically cognizable. It is transcendental reality. So then how do we come to know that? So Vedantic texts use different tools. So today I'm going to introduce two important aspects of Vedanta. One is Lakshana, which is a part of exclusively in Indo-Vedantic tradition or Indian philosophical tradition, because found in Nayayikas also. And then another important way of understanding or attempt to understand absolute reality through negative theology, which is sometimes called apophatic. It's called apophatic mysticism or negative theology used by Plato. And of course, it was popularized by Meister Eckhart, the great German mystic, who used this technique of defining God by saying what God is not. So this is there's a profound impact on the later centuries in the development of Christian theology. Though he was a Dominican priest, but he was persecuted, and his doctrine was sometimes condemned as some kind of a blasphemy at worst, or hearsay at best. But he was practically rejected, or at least his philosophy remained obscure for many centuries in Europe. So but you can find this apophatic theology. Approaching the divine or God through negative theology can be found in its original form. Can be found in the Upanishads, in the Atharvaveda Upanishad, that is Mandukya Upanishad. So the most prominent mantra of Mandukya Upanishad is the genesis of apophatic theology, negative theology. And later you find in Buddhist Shunyavada, the Zen Buddhism, also they use, when you define the absolute reality as Shunyada, it only means that absolute reality cannot be defined or comprehended in terms of empirical perception, in that sense. So first we are going to define these two lakshanas that I mentioned earlier. Lakshana means definition. So there are two types of lakshanas generally used in Vedantic dialectics, Vedantic theology. It means lakshana means a definition based on the characteristics of something. So there are two ways of understanding this. One is Tadastha Lakshana, the other is Surupa Lakshana. Tadastha Lakshana is an attempt to understand something by analyzing or pointing out the characteristics of that in a secondary sense. Surupa Lakshana is an attempt to understand it by saying what it is. Again, it may appear to be a contradiction. Vedanta says the absolute reality cannot be named or defined. But you need some tools. Even for thinking, you need language. Even thought also takes place in the form of a language. You cannot really think unless you have language as a tool. So how do we try to define and understand God or absolute reality? By saying something which is infinite, which is transcendental, which is empirically non-cognizable. So Tadastha Lakshana is secondary, remote way of indicating the absolute reality, where the characteristics are distinct from its original nature, yet indirectly in a remote manner, tries to make it known. In the Brahma Sutra, the second sutra, Adhado Brahma Jignasa, Janma Yasya Yataha. But it means from what? From that which is the origin of everything, or that from which all these originate. That from which whatever you see around you originates. In fact, this defining God as the ultimate final cause is part of mainstream Christian theology, at least according to many schools. How do you understand God? We can only understand the most direct way, or the most simple way to understand God, the one who creates this universe. Okay, so that from which all these originate. Janmad Yasya Yataha. This is the Brahma Sutra, but it is actually a sutra, a condensation of a great statement that comes in the Taittiriya Upanishad. In a dialogue, Taittiriya Upanishad is part of Krishna Yajurveda. This is an interesting dialogue in Taittiriya Upanishad between a father and his son. You can imagine a time when a son asks such a profound philosophical question to a father, and father just opens the tap of the highest form of mysticism. So here a son, Bhrigu, that's the name, he goes to his father and he makes a request. Adhihi Bhagavu Brahmedi. Bhagava means, oh Lord. It means a respectful term to his father. Please teach me the nature of the absolute reality. Now, father could have easily asked him to go to the nearest temple and pray. That would solve the problem. But that's not the way in ancient India, intelligible fathers, parents solved the problem. The father tells, you sit, think, use your brain, use your reason, and try to find out the origin from which all these originates. And he says, Annam pranam chakshusotram mano vacham iti. Annam is matter. So word, matter, different objects, trees and mountains and valleys, oceans and skies and everything. And energy, prana, mana, mind, intellect. Think of this, from where all this originates. Itova imani bhudani jayante yena jatani jivanti yet prayendi abhisambhisandi tad vijijñāsasva tad brahma. So that from which imani bhudani jayante, bhudani means all which have come into existence. That from which all these objects emerge, that by which all these exist, and that by which that towards which everything gets dissolved. That is Brahman. And vijijñāsasva. You meditate, you contemplate, you understand reality. Here, father is not telling him this is Brahman. Father is indirectly, using a remote language, telling him, well, you think of the origin of the universe, the sustaining principle behind this universe, and the ultimate point of termination of all these created things. It is called Tadastha Lakshana. So, Tadastha Lakshana is an indirect way of implying something, but what is mentioned is distinct and different from the Lakshya. Lakshanas are different from Lakshya. That is the real meaning. Lakshanas are distinct and different from Lakshya. Lakshya means what is sought to be proved. Lakshanas are the characteristics using which you try to prove something. In contrast to this, the other method is Surupa Lakshana. So in Swarupa Lakshana, you cannot really say what Brahman is. An important point is, the moment God becomes defined, God becomes finite. Now, I have to explain one important thing. When you stick to Advaitic terminology, Brahman is the term you have to use, or maybe the absolute reality. So I would stick to that term. If you define Brahman and then tell me that Brahman is infinite, you're contradicting yourself. Anything that is defined is limited by the definition. A definition is a superstructure within which you try to limit something. But still, you have to use a language. So the language is used. Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam, Brahma is used here. Or Sat, Chit, Anand. These are two ways of understanding or defining Brahman, which is actually non-definable, but using your known tools, language, to really indicate it directly. That means you are giving the essence of it. Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam, Brahma. I mean, the truth, absolute, knowledge, absolute, and bliss, absolute. That's the only way you can actually understand, define Brahman. So now the point is, these are two different ways by which the absolute reality is approached or maybe analyzed in Vedanta scriptures. That's why one important thing is, in Vedanta, scriptures do not reveal the truth. Scriptures only remove the obstacles. Shastram tu ajnana nivartakam na jnana pravartakam. All scriptures, including the Upanishads, all the books that you have got, they do not reveal the truth, but they remove all wrong notions from your mind. They drive away darkness from your mind. And once darkness is gone, what is left out is light. Again, you can make this clear with the help of the analogy. A semi-dark room where you see an object which looks like a snake, you are frightened, you bring light, you understand it is not a snake, it is only a piece of rope. Of course, in this original Rajasapabhranti analogy, there are four options given: Sarpa, Bhuchidra, Danda, Jaladhara. The rope could be mistaken to be a crack on the floor, a stick, a curved stick, a thin stream of water, and also a snake. These are four possible delusions. Of course, in modern 21st century, you can have any number of delusions. Even if you start internet, that's enough to give more delusions. And if you want many more options, you can open the computer. But in the ancient books, you can find these four possible hallucinations or delusions. But when you bring light, you are not removing a snake. You are only removing darkness. And when darkness is gone, what is left out is light. And light is you understand the object for what it is. It is only a rope. Like that, you read all the books. When you read great books, great scriptures, all the wrong notions we have in our mind about the absolute reality is gone. And when all wrong notions are gone, something will remain. That is the idea that is a rope. So the idea that is a rope is not a creation of bringing light. Rather, when you bring light, it automatically becomes revealed. Now, the most profound interpretation of this negative theology, you can see in the Mandukya Upanishad. That's what we are going to take up today. Those of you can remember the mantra, seventh mantra, is the most profound, supposed to be one of the most profound verses, mantras in the entire Vedic literature. And Shankaracharya has written a huge commentary, very, very famous commentary with the Anandagiri Tiga. And of course, later, Sureshwaracharya, who wrote Bhudaranya Vartiga, and then Nishkarma Siddhi, and then Vajaspati wrote Bhamadi and Kalpadaru, Parimala. Also in the Padmabhada's tradition, you have Panchabadiga, Panchapadya Vivarana, Vivarana Prameya Sangraha, and so on. You find in all these books, this idea is being again and again clarified. The mantra is something very, very grand and very great. It says, na antaprakyam, na bahishprakyam, na ubhayadaprakyam, na prajnanaganam, na prakyam, na aprakyam, adrishyam, avyavakaryam, alakshanam, achindyam, avyapadeshyam, ekarna prityasaram, prapanjopashamam, shantam, shivam, advaidam, chaturtham, manyinde, sa atma, sa vijñeya. It's a very, 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 very famous I shall try to give short English explanation, then I will try to explain. This Turiya, so what is Turiya? Sa Atma Sa Vijñeha. The word Turiya is used. What is Turiya? Now, in the Mandukya Upanishad, a special method of analysis is emphasized. It's called Prakriya. Prakarshena Kriyadevi Prakriya. A special way, a comprehensive way of analyzing the absolute reality. It is done with the help of our own experience. Our experience in the triple dimensions of time. Not past, present, and future, but time linked to our own internal perception and experience. That is Jagrat, Swapna, Sushupti. Waking state, dream state, and deep sleep state. So the idea is this. According to Vedanta, according to Advaita Vedanta, there is one perceiver, one subject, one witness called Drashta or Sakshi in Vedanta, which is present not only in waking state or in dream state, but also in deep sleep state. That perceiver, the cognizer, the subject, that witness is unchanged. So, Mandukya Upanishad tells you that during waking state, you experience various different objects in the external world, using our mind and our senses of perception, whether eyes or ears and so on, waking state. So at that time, the perceiver, the drashta is called Vishwa, in the macro level, Vaishwanara, and you see all these external objects, gross objects. Now, when we experience with full awareness, when we experience in waking state, certain things, we are likely to reproduce the same experience in dream state. See, when you walk in the street and when you see different objects, different cars, different vehicles, different leaves and stones in the streets, and you walk alone, you don't notice them. You don't see in the dream these things specifically. You don't see the specific objects. But suppose while walking in the street, you happen to be chased by a dog, let us say, and you had to run for some distance, and you somehow escaped. It's a hairbreadth escape. That experience will not end there. In dream state, it will be replayed. Of course, in dream, you are sleeping in a dark room, eyes closed, You don't see anything, but mentally you will be seeing yourself walking the streets. You'll be seeing mentally again the dog chasing you, and you'll see yourself running in broad daylight. Of course, all this happened when you're sleeping in a dark room with eyes closed. So their senses are not involved, but mind projects, mind accumulates, mind stores up all these experiences from waking state, and again projects outwardly at the mental level when you are dreaming. That's why in dream frequently we experience many things that we experience in waking state, but it is not exact repetition, not repetition, because in waking state you may travel from here to New York, it takes 6 hours. In dream state, it takes only split second. Well, in waking state, it takes 6 hours. In dream state, it only split second. Because in waking state, you have to buy a ticket, go to the airport, board a plane, and 6 hours of flight. In dream state, all this happen immediately at a subtle level. When mind alone projects everything, mind alone is involved, senses are not at all involved. When senses are not involved, when mind alone is involved, it is called subtle experience, called sukshma anubhuti in Vedanta. Sukshma means everything happening without the senses being involved. So without the involvement of senses, when things happen at the mental level, it's called subtle experience. But it's not exact repetition. Again, waking state, you are going to sleep here. In dream, you experience you reach London. So there is a difference with regard to time. 6 hours in waking state, split second in dream. And again, you go to sleep in one place. In dream, you feel you are somewhere else. So again, one is subtle, the other is gross. Waking state experiences are gross, dream experiences are subtle. So Sopna is the word for dream, and Jagrat is the word for Sanskrit word for waking state. So as I mentioned, it is not a duplicate. I mean, it is not a repetition, not exact repetition. As Karl Marx's famous statement, history repeats itself, first as tragedy and then as farce. So very often what we experience in dream is not exact repetition of waking state, but you can never have a dream which is totally detached and different and separated from your waking state experiences. In waking state, we do something, those samskaras and vasanas get stored up in the mental system. In dream, they are projected forward in the experience. So what about sushupti or deep sleep state or dreamless sleep? In dreamless sleep, we don't really experience anything. Any person who experiences anything in sushupti or deep sleep, he will not get real sushupti. Because either in coma or in anesthesia, you don't feel the sense of total restfulness when you come out of coma or anesthesia. You feel a kind of internal disturbance. But a man who really gets deep sleep, he feels total restfulness. This is an important thing. So according to Vedanta, there are only 2 states of human experience when you get complete rest. One is dreamless or deep sleep, sushupti, or in samadhi. In both the states, you transcend the body. In deep sleep, you transcend the body without being aware of this. In samadhi, you transcend the body with full awareness. That's the only difference. But when you can actually transcend the body, you can also transcend duality. There is no otherness. But so when you return to your own real inner self, you feel rested. You are in your own home. Now, Vedanta tells you that in all these three states, there is one witness. That witness is Turiya. That's a word used here. Turiya can mean Atman, the transcendental Atman, the witness. One may ask this question. How do you prove that? The point is, a person who has a nightmare or maybe a pleasant dream, when he wakes up, some influence or effect of that dream or nightmare he will still have even in waking state. This means somebody is present in both the states. If the Atman is not present, if the experiencer is not present in dream, then you will not remember your dream experience when you wake up. Again, after deep sleep, you feel an enormous feeling of relief, restfulness. Aham sukham aswapsam. This is Vedanta, old jargon, which actually remains the same for thousands of years. Well, I feel I slept well. That's the meaning of it. It means I feel rested. Now remember, if you look at the normal life of human beings, the most desirable thing for every person in this world is deep sleep. This is important because deep sleep alone can take you to your own spiritual home. In deep sleep, you are very close to Turiya Atman, to your own real self. So when we return to our own real self, we feel rested. Yes, when we are back in our own home, we feel rested. We're going everywhere, but we feel relieved only when we come back to our home. So in Sushupti, you have reached very close to our real home. Not our home, but close, not far. So that's why every person, you go to any of you may be doctors watching. People don't complain. They don't complain, I don't have a waking state. I don't have a dream. They all complain, I don't have good sleep. Without sleep, even people will go mad because the human mind cannot exist with the burden of waking state experiences and dream state experiences. In dream and waking state, you are always tormented by this duality. You and your experiences. You are the seer, the witness, and the experiences. The objects, drishya and drashta. Drashta is the experiencer, the perceiver. Drishya is the objects which are being experienced or seen. So long as there is this differentiation, the distinction between the drashta and drishya, between the experiencer and the experiences that are experienced, so long as this gap, subject-object distinction remains, you don't feel real restfulness. That's why we are always seeking, looking for an experience which is neither waking state nor dream. Why? Because we are closer to our own spiritual home, Turiya. Now coming back the brief translation to begin with of this mantra. So this Turiya Atman is not that which is conscious of internal. So what it means is this Atman is not the experiencer of dreams. And again, it is not the experiencer of, or it's not conscious of the external world, of the external objective world. And again, it's not conscious of both. No, Bheda Prajnam. So na is used, na means not. So you can, Eckhart uses the, Eckhart language is also very, very important. Eckhart is called It's, in its absolute terms, negative theology or apophatic mysticism or apophatic theology can be applied only in the context of Advaita. This is very important. Because Eckhart's problem was, he was persecuted. He was a Dominican priest. He managed to save his life with the help of the Dominican bishop of the locality. But then he was called to Rome, and there he disappeared. We don't know what happened. So the man disappeared. That's because he was trying to apply apophatic theology, negative theology, in the context of monotheistic interpretation. That is true also. So the point is, when you want to really understand God, most people want God to be a combination of all that is positive. God is compassionate, God is wonderful, God is beautiful. All the temples, they're all well dressed. All Hindu gods are extremely well dressed and extremely well decorated. Everywhere you find, in all traditions, one or God to be a very wonderful, superhuman being. Now, if you define God as a totality of that is positive, then how do you explain the reality, the non-deniable, the undeniable reality of many unpleasant things in this world? Then you have to invent a devil, put the whole blame on the devil's head. So these people fighting all the time. So for the first time, and unfortunately for the last time, it was a Meister Eckhart who tried to really take Christian theology beyond the monotheistic obsession of defining God as the one, the full totality of all that is good. There's a Sagala Kalyana Guna Nidhi, that is Ramanuja. So the point, but again, you find Ramanuja's Prabhati in his Sharanagati Gadya. Ramanuja also tries to take the ascent to this transcendental dimension of the monotheistic concept. That is also another, because that we will discuss when we discuss Ramanuja's philosophy, which we will discuss in course of time. So you can find this in Zen Buddhism also. The Shunyata concept also is another thing, and also in other traditions. So this is technically called in Vedanta Nishedha Mukhavakya, means speaking in terms of what may not be said about the absolute reality. That's what Eckhart did. Eckhart did not deny that God was great and good and wonderful and all that. What he said was, God cannot be limited to this definition, that God is good. That's something. So any kind of limitation is a blasphemy in the higher philosophy. You are defining what you call infinite, and then you call it infinite. So what is infinite cannot be defined. Only finite can be defined. That's called Sarva Pramana Avadhi, means the absolute reality is beyond the reach of all tools of epistemology, direct perception, inference, or whatever it is. And this mantra continues. So this turiya is, so is the mantra, na antaprajnam, na bahishprajnam. Antaprajna means, it's not taijasa. Taijasa is the term that we use for the witness of experiences in dream. And Vishwa is the term we use for the experiencer of external objects in waking state. Now, Ubhayada Prajnam, not a combination of both. Now, gradually you will understand, Turiya as Atman is present in all these states. But Turiya cannot be limited as the witness, as the experiencer of either dream objects or waking state objects. Without Turiya's presence, we won't be able to see anything. Without Atman being present, we cannot see anything. But Atman cannot be limited to the status of just a witness or experiencer of external objects in waking state, or the experience of dream objects in dream state. That's the meaning. See, without Atman being present, you will not be experiencing anything in waking state. But still, you cannot define Atman as the experience of waking state experiences alone, because they'll be limiting. You cannot limit it. That's the point. God is present everywhere. In that, can you say the whole world is equal to God? No. So that's why, because that will make the infinite finite. You'll be reducing the infinite to the status of finite. It's a very subtle logic. When if you read Shankaracharya's commentary, you come across this. He says, if you can, and that's one mantra says towards the end, if you analyze, well, who was within me in waking state? And that person was with me in dream state. That's why I'm able to remember waking state experience. That's why, waking state experiences are replayed, re-experienced in dream in a different way. But still, there have always some connection with waking state experiences. You can never have a dream without some connection to some experiences that you gathered in waking state. So there is a bridge, the same person. So something like this. A man who owns a house with 3 stories, he can go to all the 3 rooms, but you cannot see, he's the owner of the house. So you cannot say, you don't come here, you sit here. You cannot say. He is present in all the 3 rooms, and he is not present in all the 3 rooms. Why? Because he is not limited in any of these rooms. He is present in all the 3 rooms means he is not particularly present in any one of the rooms. Like that, Turiya is present in waking state, in dream state, in deep sleep state. But at the same time, Turiya is not limited to any of these states. That is subtle logic. That's why Eckhart said, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. So you cannot really define the absolute reality in terms of the Holy Trinity. Though even to define or to to describe the absolute reality in terms of the Holy Trinity itself is a blasphemy. You are defining the non-definable absolute reality, God, within limitations of definition. Any definition is a limitation. So mantra continues. Na prajnanaghanam, na pratyam, na prajnam. So you find something interesting here. That is not conscious of both, and that is not a mass of all sentiency, and that is not simple consciousness. So, and it is not insentient. So, for example, the absence of something is mentioned in order to, rather, negation of something is done in order to negate its opposite. So when you say, na antaprajnam, you cannot say Turiya is just a witness experiencer of dream objects, Taijasa. In that case, the owner of the house cannot enter other rooms. He is present in all the 3 rooms. I'm giving a rough analogy. I mean, the all-pervading reality of Brahman can be simply explained. One may ask this question, why should Upanishad say all this? Upanishad could have made a simple statement. Brahman is present everywhere. The problem solved. The problem is solved only if you are somebody like Swami Adbhutananda. Swami Adbhutananda was Sri Ramakrishna's disciple. He was so pure, and he had the grace of a great teacher. So he heard some pandits reading some scriptures, and immediately he felt it to be true. because his mind was not crowded with many different ideas. But people who habitually believe this world to be real and all these different objects to be the only reality, those who are obsessed with the reality of material things, if we tell them all these are absolutely unreal, they will not accept it. So we need philosophy because we have in our mind so many different ideas. So all these wrong ideas should be crushed and corrected by a strong, good idea. And once that is done, mind is ready. Then everything becomes simple. In fact, Shankaracharya makes the statement. You can see there is a famous statement in Shankaracharya. I shall read the Bhashya, what I said just now. I shall read the commentary and then I shall explain. The commentary is very sublime. Rajuriva Sarpadi Vigalpimana Sthanatvaye Api Atma Eka Eva Antaprakyatwadi Tena Vigalpide Yada Tada Antaprakyadita Pradesheda Vijnana Pramana Samakalameva Atmani Anartha Pravanja Nivati Lakshanam Phalam Parisamaptam Idi Turiya Dhigame Pramanandaram Sadhanandaram Va Namrugyam Rajju Sarpa Viveka Samakala Eva Rajjam Sarpa Nivati Phale Sadi Rijjadigamasya. This is an interesting point. Anyway, I should explain this. When somebody brings light to a room where there is a piece of rope which you mistake to be, let's say, snake. This is the story. This is the analogy. Now you bring light. And when you bring light, all the wrong notions in your mind. Suppose you are visiting a room, you go into a room, semi-dark, a dark object, looks like a snake lying there, which is actually rope, but there's not enough light. One man has seen a rope in the zoo the previous day. He thinks he has seen a snake, sorry. He has seen a snake in the zoo the previous day or in the forest. And he thinks this piece of rope is a snake. Another man, he has seen a curved stick in somewhere else. That memory in his mind is called Dhyasa, Smriti Rupa, means his memory in his mind. One man has seen a snake in the forest. That memory is there. So he thinks this rope is a snake. Another man, he has seen a curved stick, like this piece of rope. And he thinks it's a curved stick. Another man, he has seen a crack on the floor. And he thinks it's a crack on the floor. Another person, a thin stream of water flowing on the floor. He thinks it is Jaladhara, a thin stream of water. 4 different wrong notions. And the fourth man, fifth man brings light. And then maybe he switched on the light. No, it's very obvious, clear to everyone. It is not a snake. It is not a stick. It is not a thin stream of water. And it is certainly not a crack on the floor. When you bring light, again, you don't analyze. Is it a snake? No. It becomes so simple. The moment darkness goes away, the moment light comes, darkness goes away, that very split second, it becomes very clear to you that it is not a snake, but only a piece of rope. Again, you don't really go analyzing what kind of snake, was it a real snake? No. Like that, Shankaracharya says, when our mind is pure, like Swami Adbhutananda, he was an elderly person, but his mind is so pure. He had no wrong notions. He did not have any cobwebs in his head. Absolutely empty of all wrong notions, all pure. His mind was so pure. It's called Chitta Shuddhi. So when he heard somebody reading some Upanishads, immediately he understood it to be a fact. If it doesn't happen to others, because most people, you know what they do, even after bringing light, they go on analyzing, was it really a snake? Was it a viper, a cobra? Was it poisonous? rattlesnake, the water snake, go on analyzing. Shankaracharya says, in reality, the moment you understand it is a piece of rope and not a snake, that moment this, the snake idea goes away. The correct notion that it is a rope, that correct understanding comes. Similarly, when our mind is free of all wrong notions, by reading scriptures, by this kind of classes, because actually by these classes, people may ask this question, why bother about these ancient books? Actually, you'll be surprised when we read about these ancient books, when you go crazy over some higher sublime philosophy, you're actually cleaning your mind of all dirt and filth. Otherwise, the mind will be gathering all kinds of dust and filth and everything from everywhere. Now you are removing all this and you're filling in its place some higher ideas, which are at least not problematic, which are less troublesome. So spiritual philosophy is a friend. Spiritual philosophy doesn't take you to God. Spiritual philosophy itself will not make you spiritual. But spiritual philosophy will remove many of the obstacles, many of the dirt and filth and other undesirable things from our mind. Throw away, remove all these things, and keep our mind busy with some higher ideas. That's why I mentioned, if you cannot take the name of the God, you fight among yourself. Ramanuja said this, or Shankaracharya said this, I don't agree with this. You can say if you want, or at least you say you read Socrates' dialogues, Plato's works you can read, because that will keep our mind at a higher level. At least you remove a lot of dust and filth from our mind. But Shankaracharya says, when such a mind is ready through sadhana sadhushtaya sampatti, that is a proper discerning wisdom between real and unreal, then a sense of renunciation and a kind of self-restraint, other 6 disciplines, and a strong urge for spiritual emancipation. That is Ditya Nitya Vastu Vivekaha, Ihamutra Phalabhoga Viragaha, Shamadhi Shakka Sambhati Mumukshuttum. And again reading scriptures, higher books, thinking over that, Sravana, Marana, Nididhyasana, all these disciplines, they will not directly take you to God, but they will remove a lot of thorns and weeds and sharp stones that lie on the road that takes you to God. That's I get it. At least clean up it. You know, in our Olima retreat, a lot of our devotees do a lot of racking during the Memorial Day. They do a lot of hard work moving all the throw or stones, and we have a huge retreat here. So on the Pacific coast, 2,300 acres of land. So during Olima retreat time, number of our devotees in different places, they'll bring all these instruments, they've gone removing the weeds and grass and sharp stones lying in the streets. Now, what's the use? Somebody can walk easily. At least it helps you to move, to walk smoothly. Like that, if you can bring a lot of higher spiritual philosophy, the stones, the sharp stones can be smoothened. I mean, the sharp thorns can be replaced with some, maybe some rather less offensive, less problematic leaves or something, which is easy to remove later. So the road is clear when you practice, when you develop a devotion to higher philosophy. This Shankaracharya says, that is why the sadhanantram vanam rugyam. But your mind is ready, then no other spiritual practice is necessary. That's the idea behind. Anyway, now coming back to the original mantra. This mantra is very, very important and considered to be one of the unique statements in Hindu Vedic literature. It is the genesis, the original stuff, so to speak, of the apophatic theology of Eckhart, or you may say it was articulated thousands of years before Plato's dialogues, and also you can find this idea in Neoplatonism also. Now we are coming back to the subject. So the mantra continues now. Okay. So this turiya is not conscious of anything. It is not limited to either Jagra state, Supna state, or Sushupti state. That's the idea behind Anta Prakyam, the Vishprakyam, the Veda Prakyam, the Prakyanaganam, na Prakyam, na Prakyam. It is, again, na Prakyam it is mentioned. It is not even consciousness, it is not even awareness. What does it mean? You cannot limit it by saying it is just awareness, because it is beyond definition. You cannot name it. It is beyond anything that you can use in terms of words. Again, adrishyam, avyavaharyam, agrahyam, alakshanam, achindyam, etc. Okay, now one word is used here, adrishyam. You cannot see with you cannot perceive using any of the five senses of perception. Again, avyavaharyam. Again, you cannot explain things in terms of any practical, empirical connections or work or anything. Again, alakshanam, agrahim, it cannot be perceived at empirical level using mind and senses. Alakshanam, you cannot say it has got a certain visible, discernible characteristics. Achindyam, it cannot even be conceived of, thought of. Again, avyapadesyam, again, it doesn't have any particular, I mean, it cannot be articulated. It is beyond any kind of verbalization. That's the idea behind. So, again, it's mentioned, it is the nature of consciousness, constituting the self alone. So, when a person thinks, who was I? What was in me during the Sushupti state? And who was I during dream state? What was my true nature during waking state? If a person really contemplates on this, then he will understand it is the Atman alone. I was not a physical body. There is a physical body. In dream, I did not have physical body. I am not even mind, because in Sushupti, in deep sleep, even my mind was functioning. But after coming out of deep sleep, I feel a great relief. It's a mental experience. That means my mind was rested, but I was not aware of that experience of restfulness when I was experiencing it in deep sleep. I feel the presence of the divine, the witness, the drashta in Sushupti only when I come out of it. So what does it mean? That is the real Atman. That's the reality to be known. This is the essence of this mantra. I shall explain this further in course of time. Let me see the time now. Okay, you can have interaction. You are most welcome. Questions? This is only beginning of this very, very well-known, famous statement. The important text in the entire philosophical literature of Vedas. You are most welcome to ask questions. Okay, thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you, Maharaj. I saw Sri Ram's hand up first.
Yeah.
This is just first a quick factual question. You mentioned one of the 6 pramanas that Advaita recognizes Shabda. By Shabda, you mean Veda Pramana. Shabda is the same as Veda Pramana?
Veda Pramana.
Okay. Pramana. Yeah. Then you mentioned Tatastha Lakshana. Is that like the essence?
The Tatastha Lakshana is not essence. Tatastha Lakshana are using certain characteristics which are distinct and different from what you are trying to define. It is indirectly, in a remote way, you are trying to indicate. You are not actually naming it. You are not giving the essence of it. You are just implying, for example, that from which this whole universe emerges. It is an indirect way. you are indirectly implying that the reality from which this entire universe emerges, that reality is Brahman. There, you are not naming it. Indirectly, that from which all these come. It is indirect. And the other is Swarupa Lakshana is giving the essence of it. Yeah.
So in the definition of Atma in the Tattwabodha, it says Sthula Sukshma Karana Sharirat Vyatiritah Panchakoshatitas San Avastatra Sakshi Chidananda Swarupa. Chidananda Swarupa San Yat Tishtati Atma.
Yeah, you know, when you use the word Satchidananda, it is Swarupa Lakshana. But when you use the word Panchakosha Atida, Panchakosha Vilakshana, Panchakosha Vilakshanatvam itself means being distinct and different from Panchakoshas. This, you know, Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha, etc. Now, there you are not directly implying, you are indirectly pointing out.
So both Tatastha Lakshana and Swarupa Lakshana, both are being used.
Both you find. Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma, you can find, you know, in the primary introductory books, these things are not very clearly well defined, but sometimes there are many mantras which contain both. Tattwabodha is not like the Mandukya Upanishad mantras. Mandukya Upanishad mantras are the real pramana, Sudhi pramana. Tattwabodha is a small, tiny book that Shankaracharya wrote for the benefit of children who are beginning to study Vedanta. So naturally, many things can be mixed up. But here, these mantras are the ultimate pramana. That's why foundational text of Advaita. This is very important thing, you know.
You also said that we cannot equate the world to God. But in the Tattwabodha, if I understood it right, there is the Vyashti Vichara and the Samashti Vichara. Samashti Vichara, the outcome of that is Ishvara.
Yeah,
if I understood it correctly.
You see, Samashti, according to Vedanta, Samashti, the macro, the universal, the cosmic. Ishvara is the perceiver, conceived in the cosmic Samashti sense. Sometimes called Hiranyagarbha, sometimes we call it the Ishvara, and so on. Vyashti level, it is Jiva. So in the Mandukya Upanishad itself, you find in course of time, next class we'll discuss that. You know, the macrocosm, the universal, the macro at the macro level, and microcosm, the individual level, the fundamental unit, smallest possible unit. They are the same, but that should be understood properly. For example, at the experience level, at the micro level, prajna is jiva. But the macro level, prajna is Ishvara. Because in the Sushupti state, all these things get immersed in the Ishvara. And then again, when you wake up, these experiences will come back again. So one important thing is, this particular mantra is trying to analyze absolute reality on the basis of three levels of human experience or human consciousness or human awareness. That is Jagrat, Sopna, Sushupti, waking, dream, and deep sleep experiences. So how do we realize? So it says, if a person really contemplates, what was I? Who was I? What was in me when I had my dream? And when I slept, when I had deep sleep, I did not feel anything. But when I woke up, I feel great relief. Why? Because there was somebody who was experiencing that restfulness in deep sleep, but it was not in the state of awareness. The awareness came only when you wake up from Sushupti state. Later, I tell you, after some of these texts are over, I shall try to explain some of the fundamental ideas mentioned in some of the early books and the primary books, Tattwabodha, Atmabodha. These are all introductory books, Then you focus on this. Tattwabodha doesn't need any teacher. This simple thing, just like alphabet. Alphabet, Tattwabodha is like the alphabet of Advaita Vedanta. Okay, we'll discuss later. Thank you.
Pranam Maharaj.
Yeah, namaskar.
You mentioned about the pramanas accepted by the Advaita Vedanta, and also the pramanas accepted by the yoga system. Pratyaksha, Anumana, all these pramanas. If there is conflict between these pramanas, like for example, when we see Earth looks flat, but through inference we can see that it's not flat, it is round. And same with mirage and other things. When we see mirage appears like water, but the Shabda Pramana or a knowledgeable person informed us that it is not water. When there is conflict between these pramanas or the experiences, how do we resolve that, and what takes precedence?
I tell you, you just said something very interesting. That is, Pratyaksha Pramana, the earth looks flat. Now, scientists, physicists, they accept only, when they proclaim to accept only Pratyaksha Pramana, direct perception. But actually, without using inference, science cannot move 1 inch forward. Right? Because inference is already, all inferential activities are based on some kind of direct perception. Without a background of direct perception, you cannot have any inference. You are seeing the classical example, wherever you have seen the smoke, you have seen some connection, some association with fire. That is based on a direct experience. So when you see at a distance, there is smoke in the mountains, you infer there could be fire, either a kitchen or mountain. These are 2 examples given in the classical books. So actually, inference has its roots on direct perception. So remember, these anumanas, up to the 6 pramanas we mentioned in the context of Bhattas and Advaitins, up to that, each pramana is extended. The knowledge, the horizon of knowledge, the horizon of our understanding extends further and further, expands, keep expanding further and further as we use more and more pramanas. Pramanas are not self-contradictory. It's an important thing. Pramanas are not self-contradictory. You have to use inference only when you feel dissatisfied with what appears to be direct perception. You use inference. So just like, there is a smoke in the mountains. The previous experience is that every association of smoke and fire, you have verified earlier. But there can be smoke also without fire, without the association of fire. It is not totally impossible modern times. So the point is, but still you have to verify. And again, that you have to need comparison, analogy, upamana. You have to use it. And also sometimes you have to refer a book to confirm the testimony. And sometimes there are situations which actually defy, which don't agree with any of these tools. You have to use Sabda Pramana, you have to take a book whether there can be fire without the invariable association of, there can be smoke without the association of fire. You read a book, so you can find, and finally you understand there is really no fire. That is Anupalapti, negation. So remember, up to the 6 pramanas which are accepted by Advaitins and Bhattas, all these 6 pramanas are very relevant. Each extends the horizon of your awareness and understanding without mutual contradiction. That's an important thing to remember, So,
if we are unable to resolve the apparent conflicts,
Yeah.
What do we do at that time, Maharaj?
At that time, you used to use the inference, your inference. Yeah. What our mind and eyes tell us may not be true or may not be the whole truth. There are many number of experiences. Not only that, Vedanta, the ultimate principle of Vedanta is because you are perceived empirically, it is untrue. Vedanta tells you whatever you perceive at the empirical level, for that very reason is not absolute reality, because absolute reality is incomprehensible at the empirical level. But it is not absolutely unreal. Remember, whatever we perceive at the empirical level is not absolutely unreal, but it is certainly not absolutely real. All empirical experiences are subjected to modifications. All empirical experience, including the latest scientific discoveries. Modifications is every paradigm brings a new concept, a new idea, a new approach. Every scientific paradigm brings in a new approach. So what you said should be corrected. You say that whatever we perceive should be real. No. If that were true, then there will be no science actually. Why should you use laboratories? Absolutely. So remember, every piece, every tool of epistemology further extends the horizon of understanding. Okay.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Another thing I want to mention, Advaita doesn't say that all empirical knowledge is totally unreal. What it says is, it is not absolutely real. It's relative. It is not absolutely real, but it is certainly not absolutely unreal. It's all come within the realm of Maya and Mithya. Let we discuss later. Thank you.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you.
Swamiji, I have a question of clarification.
Yeah.
The word Atman
Yeah.
is sometimes translated in English as soul
Yeah.
and sometimes as self. Are all these three words synonymous? Do they mean the same?
Yeah, in fact, that's true. In fact, that problem is there. The word Atman is used in Vedic language, Upanishadic language, Indian philosophy, sometimes to mean mind, sometimes to mean intellect, sometimes even referring to body, and so on. But in Vedanta, when we use the word Atman, we mean Paramatman, the universal, absolute, all-pervading reality. It is, if from another perspective, the same reality when conceived as the origin of the universe, it is called Brahman. The same reality as Antaryami, as the indweller, as the immanent indweller, Antaryami is called Atman. That is also the common practice. You don't use Atman, Aham Brahmasmi. There, that all-pervading reality, which is the essence, which is the origin of the universe, it is actually my true nature. So that means Jiva Brahma Aikyam. That is the ultimate principle. So Atman in Vedanta means Antaryami. But as you mentioned, the word Atman is used in Ayurveda. Atman means body sometimes.
But in English, is soul the right, does it capture the same meaning?
That's true, soul, self, with capital letter S, but in soul they write only small letter S. Well, there's a problem of translation is there. But when you read the context, the full context, perhaps the implication becomes clear. Yeah.
Thank you.
True. It is a problem of like the ancient text, ancient words, vocabulary. Very often the meaning becomes obvious to us only when we read and listen to these ideas again and again. Thank you. Thank you.
Swami, is when you're explaining pramana, it's usually translated as right knowledge.
Pramana,
and
pramana.
yet it seems like it's illusion or false knowledge. I mean, why is it translated? I mean, because from a Vedantic perspective, it's not right knowledge.
Okay. You know, pramana shastram is the Sanskrit word. I mean, the science of tools of knowledge, epistemology, theory of knowledge. So when you use it in the sense of epistemological tool, then you can say different ways, different methods of understanding the reality. So pramana itself by itself, it could mean real knowledge. So if you should give pramana to what you say, means you should give a proof. So that is a real knowledge. It's also mean. But as you go further and further, in Vedanta, the absolute reality is not something that can be revealed, that can be comprehended using pramanas. Because if you say the pramanas can reveal the absolute reality, then the absolute reality becomes defined. It becomes limited. It ceases to be infinite. So very often to focus on the fact that absolute reality cannot be defined beyond description and definition, that's why, you know, it is beyond all pramanas. This is an important thing. In fact, these books are also negated when you get the experience. But that's the glory of Vedanta. Vedanta tells you, even the books I'm quoting and teaching, these books also are not equal to the experience of the truths which are mentioned in these books. That's why, you know, that's a sarva pramana avadhi, beyond the limitations of pramanas, transcending the reach of pramanas. That idea, in fact, you know, Eckhart did not have time or maybe the intellectual culture background to expound this, the whole, again, the pressure of the monotheistic hierarchical pressure, you know, torture and you know. So the point is, Vedanta openly tell you, this book doesn't, this book is not equal to the absolute, the experience of what the book tells you. The courage to say the book is only secondary. But book has a primary importance because the book reveals certain things intellectually. Intellectually, this book reveals certain great things. And these great things, great ideas can drive away all the unnecessary weeds and grass from our mind, cobwebs. That's the thing. As I mentioned earlier, philosophical discussion it serves a great purpose. It elevates the mind. Sincere, focused philosophical discussion. Not the purpose of writing a PhD thesis, and then there's a different matter. But genuine thirst for knowledge, for higher philosophy, it takes you very close to your spiritual goal. Again, it doesn't leave you there, but it certainly opens the road, clears the road, removes all the sharp stones and green thorns from the road that takes you to the highest goal.
Is that what Shankara means by Shravana and Tattwamayananda?
Tattwamayananda Nithyasana. More or less, we can find in all traditions, you know, the continuous dedication to holy books. With full understanding, I have to go beyond these books. And Vedanta, you're dedicated to this holy book, the full understanding, you have to go beyond these books. In India, for example, Bhagavata Purana. Bhagavata Purana is equated with Bhagavan, the Lord himself. So Bhakta, a devotee, Bhagavan, the Lord, and Bhagavata Purana, the book, are equated. Again, this is only a metaphor. If you can look upon a great book which contains spiritual ideas with a sense of sanctity and sacredness, that idea, that way of looking at that book, which obviously contains some holy, divine ideas, that purifies the mind. Don't you think so?
Yes,
Any
Swami.
divine concepts, even if we some people may call it superstition, all right, but the man is, but the superstition keeps his mind clean and healthy. That is his value. So very often, this is the importance of being devoted to ancient scriptures.
It seems though that we also need a teacher like Swami Tattwamayananda to help us understand the scriptures.
Oh, that's anyway. That is that I don't know how far I deserve that high estimate. That's a different question. Okay,
Maharaj, I'd like to venture a question about. I guess it comes with the territory that an apophatic theologian, like all mystics, is going to often be in for some persecution. Especially in the Western tradition.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned Meister Eckhart, but from the Eastern philosophical perspective, does the is it equally rough sledding, or are the fundamentals there for negative theology in a more comfortable way? In other words, are the mystics somewhat better treated?
Yeah, in Eastern tradition, Indian tradition, because that's a country where so many religious ideas were being flourishing for centuries. In Eastern tradition, Indian tradition, they were not physically persecuted. But sometimes if you become too radical in your interpretation of Indian philosophy, sometimes they were in a way excommunicated, in the sense society may not, the whole society may not support them. But they were not tortured or anything. But they will always have their own followers. Look at Kabir Das, Surdas, all these great men. Kabir Das was, maybe according to tradition, was born as a Brahmin, but he was living in a mosque. You see, you have seen the picture of Siddhi Baba. It's a great saint of India, Kabir Das, Siddhi Baba. Look at this picture. It doesn't look like a Hindu monk, but all that he taught was all Upanishadic wisdom. But but he was not persecuted for that. So all people went to him. Well, even Guru Nanak was a great saint, very great saint. He learned took great ideas from different traditions, mainly for Hinduism. He was highly honored. He was venerated, even all the time, even by Hindus also. So you find in India, there was a natural tendency, well, it is their way. I gave this example earlier, when the early Jewish migrations took place to India, you see, they landed in the southwest coast of India, and Hindu Rajas just, they look different, they seem to be worshipping different kind of, okay, fine. So they handed over some villages, some temples and places to the, okay, you go, you do your worship in whatever way you want, that's all. Persians came, the followers of Zoroaster, in the 7th century AD. They came to Saurashtra coast in the northwestern coastal region of India, Arabian Sea. And they came and they were worshippers of, they had this burning fire, Agni, And they were also given some places, okay, you settle there and do your worship temple. Nobody bothers. In the same home you find India, one man may be going to Shiva temple, another one going to Vishnu temple, third person may be going to Ganapati temple, another person may be a communist. All right, no problem. You find in India, that kind of thing doesn't go very deep, the persecution or that kind of things. They don't go very deep. It doesn't go very deep, in fact. That's an important thing to do. Just free from physical persecution of any kind, almost totally free.
Thank you, Maharaj. That's a welcome alternative. Very welcome.
Yeah.
I don't see, Mark posed a question that I believe you addressed in your answer to David, and there were no more questions on.
Thank you so much.
online.
Thank you so much. So, oh yes, I have an important announcement. And again, I'm sure you'll be sorry. There'll be no class next Sunday, September 25th. I'll be going abroad again. Some of these obligations, are very important, as part of our spiritual service. So there'll be no foundational text of Indian philosophy class on next Sunday, September 25th. No class. Please remember. The next class on foundational text of Indian philosophy will be on October 2nd, 6 p.m. So the next class will be October the 2nd. Please continue to monitor website savedanta.org for latest information. Also, I want to remind you again, we have Durga Puja celebration in the new temple, 2323 Veliover Street, San Francisco. We will have Durga Puja on Saturday, the 1st October. Please remember. Then again, of course, there will be no Bhagavad Gita class. It's an in-person class in the old temple next Friday. So thank you so much. Thank you for all your enthusiasm and encouragement. Okay, thank you. Namaskar. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat. Sri Rama Krishna Pranamastu.